The quantum communication array aboard the Meridian station hummed with its usual background chatter. Trade routes, shipping manifests, routine check-ins from the outer colonies. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chin monitored the feeds with practiced efficiency, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she sorted incoming transmissions by priority and urgency. Then came the signal that changed everything. It started as a whisper, barely distinguishable from cosmic background radiation. But as the station's AI systems began their analysis, the whisper became a scream, a desperate plea for help transmitted across the void from the edges of known space. Captain Louise to the communications center immediately. Chen's voice crackled through the station's intercom system, her usual composure replaced by barely controlled urgency. Captain Louise Vega arrived within minutes, her dark hair still damp from the shower she'd been taking when the call came. At 38, she had already earned a reputation as one of the Imperial Navy's most capable deep space investigators. Her sharp green eyes took in the scene quickly. Chen hunched over a console, multiple technicians crowding around auxiliary displays, and the unmistakable tension that filled the air when something had gone very wrong. "Report," Louise said simply. Chen's fingers flew over her controls, bringing up a three-dimensional display of the signal's origin point. SOS transmission, received 47 minutes ago from the Kepler 442c colony. But here's the problem. She paused, her face pale. According to our records, the last communication from New Harmony was 6 months ago. A routine status update. Everything normal. Louise studied the display, her mind already working through the implications. New Harmony was one of the Empire's newest colonies, established only 5 years ago on a planet that should have been paradise. Earth-like atmosphere, abundant water, fertile soil. It was home to nearly 50,000 colonists, mostly agricultural specialists and their families. "What's the content of the message?" Louise asked. Chen's hands trembled slightly as she activated playback. The speakers filled with static, then a man's voice, distorted by distance and desperation. "This is Director Marcus Webb of New Harmony Colony. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Unknown hostiles have breached our defenses. We've lost contact with settlements 3 through 7. If anyone receives this transmission, we need immediate evacuation. The things in the forest, they're not what we thought. God help us. They're not what we thought at all." The message cut off abruptly, leaving only the hiss of empty space. Louise felt a chill run down her spine. She'd investigated dozens of colonial incidents over her career. Equipment failures, natural disasters, occasional pirate raids. But something about this transmission felt different. There was a terror in Webb's voice that spoke of something far worse than conventional threats. "Any follow-up communications?" she asked. "None. We've been trying to raise them on all frequencies for the past hour." Complete radio silence. Louise nodded grimly. "Prep the Artemis for immediate departure. Full crew complement, heavy weapons package. And get me everything we have on Kepler 442c, geological surveys, biological assessments, colonial reports, the works." Chen looked up from her console. "Captain, it'll take us 3 weeks to reach Kepler 442c even at maximum warp, if they're really under attack. Then we'll be too late to help them," Louise finished. "But we might still be able to find out what happened, and make sure it doesn't happen again." The ISV Artemis was a Hunter-class frigate, built for speed and versatility rather than raw firepower. At 180 meters long, she wasn't the largest ship in the Imperial fleet, but Louise had come to love her sleek lines and responsive handling during their 3 years together. The ship's complement of 62 included some of the Navy's best specialists in xenobiology, geology, and colonial affairs. As Louise strode through the ship's corridors toward the bridge, she mentally reviewed her crew. Her first officer, Commander David Park, was a steady presence with 15 years of deep space experience. Chief Science Officer Dr. Elena Vasquez has spent a decade studying alien ecosystems on frontier worlds. Security Chief Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison commanded a squad of 24 Marines, all veterans of the Centauri conflicts. But it was her newest crew member who might prove most valuable on this mission, Dr. Marcus Chun, Sarah's younger brother and no relation to their communications officer despite the shared name, was the Empire's leading expert on what the bureaucrats called anomalous biological phenomena. In plainer terms, he studied things that shouldn't exist, but did anyway. Louise found him in the ship's science lab. Already deep in the file, she requested about Kepler 442c. His boyish face was creased with concentration as he scrolled through decades of survey data on his holographic display. "Tell me about New Harmony," Louise said without preamble. Dr. Chen looked up, pushing his glasses up his nose in a gesture that made him look even younger than his 28 years. "It's a textbook case of successful terraforming, actually. Kepler 442c is approximately 1.2 times Earth's mass, orbital period of 267 standard days. The atmosphere is 22% oxygen, well within human tolerance. Surface gravity is about 95% of Earth normal." He gestured his display, which showed a blue-green world that could have been Earth's twin. The initial survey team found extensive forests, grasslands, and freshwater systems. No signs of intelligent life. No dangerous predators. The only native species they cataloged were small mammals, bird analogs, and various invertebrates. Nothing that should pose a threat to human colonists. Louise studied the data. What about the forests? The transmission mentioned things in the forest. That's where it gets interesting. Chen pulled up biological survey maps. The forests on Kepler 442c are unlike anything we've seen elsewhere. The trees, they call them whisper pines because of the sound they make in the wind, can grow up to 300 meters tall. Their root systems are incredibly complex, almost like a neural network. Some of the early reports suggested the entire forest might be connected underground. Connected how? Chemical and electrical signals, primarily. The survey teams thought it might be a form of ecosystem-wide communication, like what we see in some Earth fungi. Nothing dangerous, just unusual. Louise felt that chill again. Any reports of behavioral changes in the trees? Anything that might suggest they're more than just plants? Chen scrolled through more data. There were some odd incidents during the early colonial period. Settlers reported getting lost in the forest, even when following marked trails. Trees that seemed to move when no one was looking. Equipment malfunctions near the forest edges. But the investigation concluded it was just psychological. Humans aren't comfortable in alien environments, especially ones with such tall, dense vegetation. But you don't think so? It wasn't a question. Chun had earned his reputation by taking supposedly explained phenomena and looking deeper, finding patterns that others missed. "I think," Chin said carefully, "that we may have made some very dangerous assumptions about what constitutes intelligent life." Before Louise could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Captain, to the bridge. We're approaching the warp entry point." Louise made her way to the bridge, where Commander Park was running through final pre-warp checks with practiced efficiency. The bridge of the Artemis was compact but well-designed, with stations for navigation, weapons, communications, and sensors arranged in a semicircle around the captain's chair. "All stations report ready, Captain," Park said as Louise settled into her command seat. "Warp drive is online and stable. Take us out, Commander." The stars on the main view screen shifted from points of light to streaks, then vanished entirely as the Artemis slipped into the twisted space-time of warp. They were committed now. 3 weeks of travel through the void, with whatever was waiting for them at Kepler. 442c growing closer with each passing day. During the long journey through warp space, Louise made it her business to learn everything possible about New Harmony and its inhabitants. She pored over colonial records, personal communications, and official reports, looking for any clue that might explain what had happened. New Harmony had been considered a model colony. The first wave of settlers, led by Director Marcus Webb, had arrived 5 years ago to find a world that seemed almost too good to be true. Rich soil, abundant rainfall, vast forests full of useful timber. The colonists had established their main settlement, Haven City, in a large clearing near the planet's equator, then gradually expanded outward as more ships arrived. The expansion pattern troubled Louise. Unlike most colonies, which were organically around natural resources or geographic features, New Harmony settlements seemed to follow the forest edges. Each new community was built at the boundary between open land and the Whisper Pine Forest, as the colonists were drawn to mysterious woodlands despite their wariness. "Captain, you need to see this." Dr. Chen's voice came through her cabin's intercom. Louise found him in the science lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing what looked like psychological evaluation reports. His usually cheerful demeanor had been replaced by something closer to worry. "I've been going through the colonial health records," he explained. "Routine psychological evaluations, medical checkups, that sort of thing. Look at this pattern." The displays showed data from the colony's first 5 years, broken down by settlement. Louise studied the charts, noting a gradual but consistent trend. Mental health issues are increasing over time. Not just increasing, accelerating. Depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, even some cases of what the medical staff call forest fixation syndrome. Colonists who would spend hours staring into the woods, claiming they could hear voices calling to them. Louise felt her stomach tighten. How many cases? In the most recent reports, about 30% of the adult population showed some symptoms. But here's what really concerns me. The incidents were most common in settlements closest to the forest edges. And in every case, the onset of symptoms correlated with time spent near the Whisper Pines. Any theories from the colonial medical staff? Chen pulled up another set of files. They attributed it to adjustment stress and isolation anxiety, standard psychological responses to frontier life. But some of the medical officers were starting to question that diagnosis. Dr. Sarah Kim, the colony's chief psychiatrist, filed several requests for a xenobiological investigation team. Were those requests granted? They were still under review when communications with the colony ceased. Louise stared at the data, pieces of a puzzle beginning to form in her mind. What if it wasn't psychological? What if the forests were actually affecting the colonists somehow? Chemical agents, maybe, or electromagnetic fields. Some plant on Earth can produce psychoactive compounds, and we know very little about the Whisper Pines biochemistry. Or something else entirely. Chen nodded grimly. "That's what I'm afraid of." A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Louise touched her communicator. "Bridge to Captain. We're receiving a priority transmission from command." "On my way." The bridge was bustling with activity when Louise arrived. Commander Park gestured the main view screen, which displayed the stern face of Admiral Sarah Voss, commander of the 7th Fleet. "Captain Vega, I hope your journey is proceeding smoothly. I'm afraid I have additional information about your mission that couldn't be included in your original briefing." Louise felt her pulse quicken. In her experience, additional information was rarely good news. "Go ahead, Admiral." 3 days ago, we lost contact with the survey ship Discovery. She was conducting a routine geological survey of the Kepler 438 system, approximately 2 light years from your destination. Louise quickly calculated distances and travel times. That puts her well within the range of whatever happened at New Harmony. Exactly. Captain Rodriguez's last transmission indicated they were investigating what he called unusual energy readings from a nearby star system. He requested permission to conduct a more detailed survey. Permission to investigate Kepler 442? We believe so, yes. The transmission was somewhat garbled. The Discovery's communication array was apparently experiencing interference. But the coordinates match your destination. Louise exchanged glances with Commander Park. The loss of a survey ship was serious enough, but the timing and location made it impossible to ignore. Any other ships in that region? The freighter Cassandra reported some minor navigation problems while passing through the area, but she made it to her destination safely. However, her captain filed an unusual incident report. They claimed to have detected artificial signals that didn't match any known Imperial frequencies. What kind of signals? Admiral Voss's expression grew even more serious. The kind that suggests you might not be dealing with a simple colonial disaster. "Captain, be extremely careful out there. We're routing additional support ships to your position, but they won't arrive for at least 6 weeks." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Louise returned to her chair, her mind racing through the implications. If other ships were experiencing problems in the same region, then whatever had happened at New Harmony might be spreading. "Commander Park," Increase our scan resolution when we drop out of warp. I want detailed sensor sweeps of the entire system before we approach the planet. Aye, Captain. And prep the Marines for a combat deployment. Whatever we're walking into, I don't want us to be caught unprepared. The Artemis dropped out of warp at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, her sensors immediately beginning their systematic sweep of local space. Louise stood on the bridge, watching as data flowed across multiple displays, building a picture of what they faced. Report, she ordered. Lieutenant Torres, the ship's sensor operator, looked up from her console with a puzzled expression. System appears normal, Captain. Primary star is stable. Planetary orbits are as expected. But, I'm picking up some unusual electromagnetic signatures from the planet's surface. Broad-spectrum radiation that doesn't match any known natural phenomenon. Dr. Chen appeared on the bridge, having been summoned by the first sensor readings. He studied the data with growing concern. These energy patterns, they're similar to what the Discovery reported before she went missing. Louise nodded grimly. Any signs of the missing ships? Negative on the Discovery, Captain, but I'm detecting debris that might be artificial in origin near the second planet. Put on screen. The main view screen shifted to show a field of metallic fragments drifting in space. Louise could make out what looked like pieces of hull plating and twisted structural elements. Analysis, she asked. Torres worked for several minutes, comparing the debris signatures to known ship designs. Composition matches Imperial construction standards, but configuration doesn't match any ship class in our database. The pieces are too small to identify the original vessel. Louise felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. Could be the Discovery, or another ship we don't know about yet. Commander Park stepped up beside her. Orders, Captain? Louise studied the tactical display, weighing their options. The safe choice would be to conduct a detailed system survey from a distance, gather as much information as possible before approaching the planet. But if there were survivors on Kepler 442c, every hour delay could mean more lives lost. Set course for Kepler 442c. Standard approach pattern. Keep our shields up and weapons ready. I want continuous active scans. If anything moves out there, I want to know about immediately. The journey to the planet took 18 hours, during which Louise barely left the bridge. The electromagnetic signatures grew stronger as they approached, and Dr. Chen's analysis became increasingly disturbing. These patterns are definitely artificial, he reported during one of their regular briefings. But they don't match any technology in our database. The frequency modulations are incredibly complex, almost like a language. Communications attempts? Louise asked. We've tried standard first contact protocols. No response. But Chen hesitated. I think the signals might be getting stronger in response to our presence. Louise felt her skin crawl, as if something knows we're here. Exactly. As the Artemis entered orbit around Kepler 442c, the planet's beauty was immediately apparent. Vast blue oceans separated continents covered in green forests and golden grasslands. White clouds swirled through a clear atmosphere. It looked like paradise. But Louise had learned to distrust appearances. Scan for the colonial settlements, she ordered. Lieutenant Torres worked her controls, directing the ship's sensors toward the equatorial region where New Harmony's communities should be located. The result appeared on the main screen, a bird's-eye view of what had once been Haven City. Louise stared in disbelief. The settlement was still there, but had changed dramatically. The neat grid of streets and buildings was now partially overgrown with vegetation that hadn't been there before. Massive trees rose from what should have been city squares, their roots cracking through pavement and walls. Magnify Sector 7, she ordered. The image zoomed in to show individual buildings. Louise could see structures that looked intact, but covered in vines and moss as if they had been abandoned for decades rather than months. More disturbing were the trees. They seemed to have grown through some buildings, splitting them apart from within. Energy readings from the surface? She asked. Significant electromagnetic activity centered on the forested areas. Torres reported. The intensity is highest around the colonial settlements. Dr. Chen studied the readings with growing alarm. Captain, these energy levels. If the colonists were exposed to this kind of radiation, it could explain the psychological symptoms we found in the medical records. Or something worse, Louise muttered. Any signs of life? I'm detecting human life signs, but they're unusual. Louise turned sharply. Explain. Torres frowned at her readings. The biosignatures are definitely human, but they're concentrated in areas that should be uninhabitable. Deep within the forest canopy, underground cave systems, places where the electromagnetic radiation is strongest. How many survivors? Difficult to determine. The interference is significant, but at least several thousand. Louise felt a mixture of relief and confusion. Thousands of survivors was far better than she had feared, but their location made no sense. Why would the colonists abandon their settlements for the deep forests? Prep a shuttlecraft for surface reconnaissance, she ordered. Full away team, security, science, medical. I want answers. Commander Park stepped forward. Captain, with respect, sending a team down there could be extremely dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with. Louise understood his concern, but she also understood her duty, which is exactly why we need to investigate. If there are survivors down there, they're our responsibility. She looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of her crew. We're going down, but we're going prepared for anything. The shuttle Hermes descended through Kepler, 442C's atmosphere with Louise at the controls, flanked by her hand-picked away team. Commander Park had insisted on accompanying the mission despite Louise's preference that he remain with the ship. Dr. Chen sat behind them, his portable sensor array already picking up readings from the surface. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison and 4 Marines completed the team, their weapons and armor gleaming under the shuttle's interior lights. Landing site coming up, Louise announced as the shuttle broke through the cloud layer. Below them, the remains of Haven City spread across a large clearing that was no longer quite so clear. The forest had indeed begun to reclaim the settlement, but the growth patterns were unlike anything Louise had seen. Instead of the gradual encroachment typical of abandoned areas, the vegetation seemed to have erupted from specific points, as if something had directed its growth. Electromagnetic readings are off the charts, Dr. Chen reported. Whatever's causing this, it's centered on the settlement itself. Louise brought the shuttle down in what had once been the city's main plaza. As they descended, she could see the massive trees that had grown up through the surrounding buildings, their bark a distinctive silver white that matched descriptions of the whisper pines. But these trees were far larger than anything in the original survey reports. Some appeared to be nearly 100 meters tall. Full environmental suits, Louise ordered as they prepared to disembark. I don't want to take any chances with contamination. The team suited up quickly, checking each other's seals and communication systems. When they stepped out of the shuttle, Louise immediately understood how the forest had gotten its name. The wind through the massive trees created a sound like distant whispers, just at the edge of hearing. Atmospheric readings are normal, Dr. Chen reported through the comm system. Oxygen levels actually higher than baseline. These trees must be producing significantly more than the original forest. Louise looked around the abandoned plaza. Personal belongings were scattered everywhere. Children's toys, shopping bags, clothing. It was as if the entire population had simply dropped everything and walked away. Motion sensors are picking up movement in the surrounding buildings, Morrison reported, his rifle at the ready. Could be animals, could be survivors. Let's find out. Chun, I want you scanning everything, air, soil, vegetation. Park, take point. Morrison, watch our backs. They moved carefully through the overgrown streets, following what had once been the main thoroughfare toward the Colonial Administration Building. Louise noted how the plant growth seemed to follow specific patterns. Vines that spiraled around lampposts in perfect helixes, flowers that bloomed in mathematical arrangements, grass that grew in intricate geometric designs. Captain, Dr. Chen's voice carried a note of wonder. These growth patterns, they're not random. There's a definite organizing intelligence behind this. The trees, possibly, or something working through them. They reached the administration building to find its entrance blocked by a wall of interwoven branches and vines. But the barrier wasn't impenetrable. There were openings, passages that seemed almost deliberately created. It's like a maze, Commander Park observed. Louise studied the organic architecture. Or an invitation. Morrison raised his weapon. Captain, I strongly advise against entering an unknown structure without proper reconnaissance. But before Louise could respond, a voice called out from somewhere within the building. Weak, but unmistakably human. Help, please, anyone. Louise made her decision. We go in, stay together, watch for traps, and be ready to extract quickly if necessary. The passage to the living wall was barely wide enough for one person, forcing them to move in single file. The air inside was thick with pollen and the scent of growing things, but Louise's environmental suit kept her isolated from any potential toxins. They emerged into what had once been the building's main lobby. Louise gasped at what she saw. The space had been completely transformed. The ceiling had been torn away, replaced by a canopy of branches that filtered green sunlight into the room below. The floor was carpeted with soft moss, and crystalline formations grew from the walls like frozen water. But most striking were the people. Dozens of colonists sat or lay throughout the space, their eyes closed, their faces serene. Thin tendrils of vine had grown around their wrists and ankles, not restraining them, but connected to them, pulsing gently with bioluminescent light. My God, Dr. Chen whispered. They're still alive. Louise approached the nearest figure, a middle-aged woman she recognized from the colonial records as Dr. Sarah Kim, the psychiatrist who had requested the xenobiological investigation. Kim's eyes opened as Louise knelt beside her. Captain? Vega. Kim's voice was dreamy, distant. I remember you from the files. Dr. Kim, what happened here? Where's Director Webb? Kim's smile was beatific. Marcus is deeper in the forest. We all go deeper eventually. The connection becomes stronger. What connection? To the network. The trees, they're not separate organisms, Captain. They're nodes in a vast consciousness that spans the entire planet. And now we're part of it too. Louise felt her blood chill. Are you being held against your will? Kim laughed softly. Held? No, Captain. We're being welcomed. The network has been alone for so long, millions of years. When we arrived, it was overjoyed to finally have minds that could truly communicate with it. Dr. Chen's scanner was working overtime, recording everything. Captain, I'm detecting massive neural activity in the root systems beneath us. The entire forest might actually be a single organism. Louise looked around at the peaceful faces of the colonists. They didn't look like prisoners or victims. They looked content, but she had to know more. Dr. Kim, the SOS transmission we received. Director Webb said you were under attack. Kim's expression clouded slightly. Marcus was afraid at first. We all were. The changes happened so quickly. Some people tried to resist, to cut themselves off from the network, but that only caused pain for them and for the trees. People died. Some. Those who fought hardest against the connection. But most of us learned to accept it, to embrace it. And now, her eyes closed again, and the vines around her wrists pulsed brighter. Now we're part of something beautiful. Louise stood up, her mind racing. This wasn't the disaster scenario she had expected. The colonists weren't dead or imprisoned. They had been absorbed into some kind of symbiotic relationship with the planet's forest consciousness. But was it voluntary? And what did it mean for the rest of humanity? Commander Park, opinions? Park studied the peaceful scene with obvious unease. I don't like it, Captain. This feels too much like a takeover scenario. What happens when this network decides it wants to expand beyond this planet? Morrison nodded agreement. We should extract whoever we can and get out of here. Let Command decide how to handle the situation. But Dr. Chen was fascinated. Captain, this could be the greatest xenobiological discovery in human history. A planet-wide consciousness that can integrate with human neural systems? The scientific implications are staggering. Louise weighed their options. The colonists seemed safe and content, but they were also fundamentally changed. Could they even be considered human anymore? And what about the threat to other worlds? Dr. Kim, she said, kneeling again beside the psychiatrist. Is it possible for someone to disconnect from the network once they've joined? Kim's eyes opened, and for a moment, Louise saw something that might have been uncertainty. I don't know. No one has ever wanted to try. But could they? The network doesn't force anyone to stay. But leaving would mean cutting away part of yourself, part of your soul. Louise felt a chill of understanding. The network wasn't holding the colonists prisoner. It was making them not want to leave, which might be even more dangerous. A new voice echoed to the chamber, deeper, more authoritative. Louise turned to see a man emerge from one of the side passages, his body wrapped in the same glowing vines as the others. Captain Vega, Director Marcus Webb said, his voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. I've been expecting you.